What if I told you the greatest empire in human history wasn't destroyed by its enemy? It was destroyed by its own people. The man who conquered it, the man who burned its capital to the ground, was actually the last person to show its king any respect. The most powerful king on earth, a man who commanded 50 million people, whose treasury was so full of gold it took 10,000 mules just to carry it, died completely alone. Not on a battlefield, not on his throne, in the back of a wooden cart, in the middle of a desert, stabbed by the men he trusted most. That king was Darius III, and what happened to him in the summer of 330 BC is one of the most shocking, most human, and most painfully relevant stories in all of history. Because this isn't really about Persia. This is about what happens when the people around you choose themselves over everything. Before we talk about the fall, you need to feel what was lost. When most people hear Persian Empire, they think of the movie 300, the villain, the monster. That is one of the greatest historical lies ever told. The Persian Achaemenid Empire, founded by Cyrus the Great in 550 BC, was the most sophisticated civilization on Earth at its time. While most of the world was still living in mud huts, Persia had a functioning postal system, paved roads, standardized currency, and a single language connecting 28 different nations across 3 continents. But here is the thing that will genuinely shock you. Cyrus the Great issued the first human rights declaration in recorded history. He freed the Jewish people from Babylonian slavery. He told every conquered nation to keep their religion, their language, their culture. The United Nations has a replica of his cylinder on display to this day. This empire didn't just rule the world. For a moment in history, it was genuinely trying to make it better. And it survived for over 220 years, outlasting every challenge, every rebellion, every rival, until a 22-year-old from Macedonia decided he wanted to own everything. Now here is something almost nobody knows about Darius III. He never wanted to be king. He wasn't the crown prince, he wasn't groomed for the throne. He was a distant royal cousin working as a government official when a powerful court eunuch named Bagoas pulled him into the deadliest game of his life. Bagoas had already...
In 334 BC, Alexander crossed into Persian territory with 40,000 soldiers, and nobody in Persia lost sleep over it. Persia had millions of soldiers, vast resources, and a professional military that had dominated the ancient world for 2 centuries. Alexander had 40,000 men and a belief in himself that bordered on madness. But Alexander didn't fight like anyone who came before him. He moved at terrifying speed. He made decisions in seconds that other commanders took days to consider. And he had this ability to make every soldier around him feel like they were part of something that would be remembered forever. At the Battle of Issus in 333 BC, Darius and Alexander faced each other directly for the first time. Darius had more soldiers, more chariots, more everything. And when Alexander personally led his cavalry in a direct charge, not at the Persian army, but straight at Darius himself, the King of Kings turned his chariot around and fled. He left his mother on the battlefield, his wife, his daughters, all captured. And here is where the story becomes deeply human. Alexander treated them with complete dignity, clothed them, protected them, told Darius' mother, Alexander is not your enemy. Darius' own mother eventually came to love Alexander like a surrogate son. While Darius sent letter after letter offering gold, territory, his daughter's hand, begging for peace, Alexander rejected every single one.
Then came May of 330 BC. Alexander walked into Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the Persian Empire. The city didn't resist. The gates simply opened. The treasury alone contained so much gold that removing it required 10,000 mules and 500 camels. Alexander stayed for 5 months. He walked the halls where Persian kings once received tribute from Egypt, India, and Babylon. He touched carvings that took decades to create. And then one night, there was a celebration. Wine, victory, and a woman named Thias stood up. An Athenian woman carrying 150 years of grief. She reminded the room that the Persian king Xerxes had burned Athens to ash generations ago. She said, "Burn it back." The room erupted. Alexander, young, drunk, and swept up in the moment, said yes. Thias threw the first torch. By morning, 2 centuries of Persian art, sacred Zoroastrian texts, and carved stone tributes from 28 nations were ash. Ancient sources say Alexander walked through the ruins and wept, that he immediately regretted it. But Persepolis was gone. And somewhere to the east, Darius saw the smoke rising on the horizon and kept running.
Even with his capital in ashes, Darius refused to surrender. He rode east toward Bactria, convinced the eastern provinces would rally behind him, that he could still rebuild, that this wasn't over. One of his most powerful generals rode at his side, Bessus, governor of Bactria, a battle-hardened commander with his own army, a man Darius had trusted with his life. But Bessus was not watching Darius with loyalty anymore. He was watching him with calculation. He saw a king who had fled 2 battles. He saw an empire that was finished. And he made a decision, cold and deliberate and utterly without honor, that the Persian throne was still worth having, even if Darius wasn't on it. In July of 330 BC, while Darius's exhausted column moved through the barren desert east of modern Tehran, Bessus made his move. He and his co-conspirators surrounded their own king, arrested him, bound him with rope, and threw him into the back of an ox cart. Their plan was to use him as a bargaining chip. But then scouts came riding in at full speed. Alexander was coming. He had ridden 80 kilometers through total darkness, through the desert night to catch them. Bessus panicked. He couldn't escape with Darius. He couldn't hand him over. So he did the only thing a man with no honor does when the walls close in. He stabbed him and rode away into the darkness, leaving Darius alone and bleeding in the back of a cart in the middle of the desert.
The King of Kings, ruler of 50 million people, abandoned like luggage on the side of a road. Alexander arrived at dawn. His soldiers found the cart first. Then Alexander came. He looked at the man he had chased across the known world. The man who had fled from him twice, whose family now lived under Alexander's protection. And Alexander reached back, took off his own cloak, and laid it gently over Darius. He ordered a royal funeral, full Persian honors, a burial fit for the King of Kings. The man who destroyed the Persian Empire was the last man to treat its king with dignity. The men who swore loyalty, who ate at his table, rode at his side, called him their king, they left him bleeding in a cart in the desert, and his sworn enemy covered him with a cloak. That is how the Persian Empire ended. Not with a final battle, not with a last stand, not with glory. With a king dying alone, and a conqueror being the only one decent enough to care. And 2,300 years later, that still tells us something.
This mood you, please subscribe to our YouTube channel for further the untold stories like this. Thank you very much.